Yeah, let the big dog hunt. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Kallas Remarks with your host, Joe Staszak, Steve Kallas, and special guest, his son, Johnny Kallas. We always bring him in down the stretch when the games get really important, and we need some real analysis. So,
Right, we need some
we
knowledge.
need some knowledge. How you doing, Johnny?
I'm good. Great to be
You,
with you guys, man.
you too,
Appreciate it.
Steve. How you doing, man?
Oh, good. Great to be with you as always.
The lead story this week, pretty much, other than the actual games, Bill Belichick is going back to college. I shouldn't say going back to college because he's never really been in college, but he said it was a lifelong dream. Okay, Bill, sure. North Carolina heading up their program. Nice program. They just had Mac Brown, who won a national championship. Butch Davis, who built a program in Miami that almost won a national title. That did win a national title, but he left to go to the Browns. So they've had some pretty high profile coaches there, and this is the biggest, obviously. Johnny, we'll start with you because, like, you're Mr. New England Patriots, and you know Hoodie probably better than both of us. Your thoughts on a lot of the criticism? I think it's speculation because some people don't really know what he's really like behind the scenes. I think there's more to Bill Belichick than just the curmudgeon mumbling, blah blah blah. I think there is a personality there. Maybe he can connect with the kids. We shall see. His dad, coached at Navy and was an assistant in North Carolina. So he grew up with a father who coached college football. But your thoughts on Bill Belichick going back to college at 72 years old and taking this job to run the program?
I was immediately surprised when I heard about what seemed to be pretty genuine interest. This is early in the week between UNC and Belichick because I just thought he was really an NFL lifer. Then when you think about it, and I actually listened to his press conference yesterday, including him for once giving some answers at a press conference,
Right?
starting off on the right foot, so to speak. He's really looking. He's a coach and he wants to coach. Like that's ultimately, I think, what this came down to. And the reality is, because the college timeline's earlier than the NFL, and this is kind of mind-blowing to me, maybe you guys as well, maybe not, is that there was no guarantee that he was going to get a job in the NFL. That was going to work both ways. And obviously, in order to, pick up a job in college, you really have to get the ball rolling now. You can't necessarily wait for a couple months. There are multiple NFL jobs opening. I'm assuming he's had no interest or he had no interest in those jobs. I wouldn't downplay the impact of how, frankly, sentimental Belichick is. He brought his dad's UNC hoodie from 1950 whatever to the press conference yesterday. He was a toddler when, his dad coached for a couple of years at UNC. He does have a deep appreciation for the program. LT went there. I think Julius Peppers was sort of in the like there is a deep sort of history to that program, even though it's a basketball first school. So I think the reality is he's a coach who wants to coach. I just want to make a note, it's disappointing to me, and it really shows where the emphasis on power and control by ownership and maybe more importantly, front office executives in the NFL. I understand that sort of it didn't go too well in New England the last few years. I think if I think this was smart by Belichick. Took a year off, kind of had a media presence, showed his personality a little bit. But to me, it really indicates, do these NFL teams really want to win, like compete for championships?
Or are
Some
they
of them,
worried more about losing power?
I think they're more about losing power.
I,
You're the
I
Chicago.
agree. I agree.
These like Seth Wickersham came out with another in-depth piece on him, and apparently Belichick's been meeting with, the Josh McDaniels, Patricia Lombardi, who's joining him in UNC, and basically was saying, can we weekly throughout the season, can we figure out where maybe I want to go or where we want to go? And they actually identified, surprisingly, I think Cincinnati would be a perfect destination. I don't know what they're doing. Their defense is horrible. That owner doesn't pay though, so maybe that's a
He
problem.
doesn't.
But Belichick and Burrow, man, that would be, I mean, that's exactly what Belichick needs. But they actually
But
identified.
Johnny, if I could ask this though, what about the old I'm gonna beat Don Shula because he called me a cheater. He's only like 14 games out. That would be two bad seasons to pass him. He just won't go there.
So I think Belichick does. I think he cares about that, but ultimately, I think he just needs to coach. That's my
I
understanding.
agree. He's a coach and wants to coach. But if Andy Reid coaches 5 more years, I mean, he's going to pass that record too. So I think that he'll surpass Belichick if Belichick got it and then retired. I don't know. I think Johnny, you're right. I don't think it might be something important to him, but not as important as just getting back and being, that's what he was born to do. Be a
That's
coach.
what it, that's what he was born to do. And look, you see how quickly these programs turn around now with the CFP too. Look at Indiana this year, look at SMU. Like, if it goes really well for a year or two, I'm not saying, I think it's a small chance, but you don't know what could happen in a year or two if this goes really well for Belichick and he gets some interest elsewhere.
Well,
So
I will say this, he's got a 10 million buyout that he can buy them out for 10 million if he leaves.
yeah, so I think it's interesting though. I'm just going to quickly note they mentioned Chicago actually as a destination that would make sense. You have a potentially good young quarterback. You have a decent defense. The division is brutal now, but it's just clear that like there was no interest from ownership or front office. It's
Wow.
so to me it's like these guys just they care more about power than I understand. There's a chance with Belichick, but you have a guy who's won six Super Bowl, well, eight Super Bowls as a coach in total, been to however many. Like that's the guy you got to take a chance on if you want to actually build a competitive championship team. But it should be interesting. It's surprising, but when you really unpack it, I actually don't think it's shocking.
Do you think it hurt him a little bit that once Tom Brady left, his numbers went down? He didn't have that zip or the pop that Belichick, like if he left after winning a Super Bowl. He had some down years in New England.
Oh yeah, and I think, it's interesting because I've heard him now multiple times in the press be regarded as the greatest coach of all time, the greatest coach of all time. I actually think the last few years in New England really challenges that argument. And you have a guy in Kansas City who's coming up who frankly was a lot more successful without his star quarterback, didn't win a Super Bowl, but then Belichick was without his star quarterback, right? When you look at Reed, both Chiefs pre Mahomes, but then obviously with the Eagles, I mean, how many? Four championship games in a row?
Uh,
Five championship games in a row. But I think ultimately the problem for Bill was I think he was like, look, I don't know if I'm going to get a job offer. There were six or seven openings last year. I was a finalist for one. It sounds like he wasn't in the top three. I think Kraft was bad mouthing him, which look, I could go on forever if that's true. I think that's ridiculous, but
I
it
think it
sounds
is too. Are you kidding me?
this sounds, I mean, and he's having some Hall of Fame problems of his own that doesn't help with, but that's also besides the point. But yeah, I think he needs to coach, man. I think he did this media thing. He tried to embrace it. It's fine for him, but he also, I don't know if you guys heard him on McAfee on Monday, but he really talked about it was really his recruiting pitch. He was already developing it.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
When I heard that, I was like, ooh, okay. Like I can like he's
Hmm.
gonna build a professional program. He's gonna be a pipeline for players who are really good who potentially could go to the NFL. If not, he's gonna teach them life skills. And you could see that being attractive, I would think, to a lot of guys,
Right?
potentially in college.
He sounded to me like the Calipari of now college football because that's what Calipari was at Kentucky all those years. Just, come with me, one and done. It's not the same in football, I understand, but he's going to get some talented guys. But the one negative I heard about possibilities is what is the NIL program at Carolina compared to, fill in the blank, Alabama, Georgia, whatever. And a lot of people, well, the one guy I heard on ESPN, I don't remember who it was, simply said, well, is the star going to show up and say, well, what are you getting me in NIL money? And what will the money be at North Carolina versus these top 10 schools? Because you're right, Carolina's had a good program, but they haven't had an elite program lately. And so we'll see what happens. But I think obviously he'll be a success. It's just interesting to me. And I guess, Johnny, your way would be to say he's got 50 million in hand and nothing in the bush because he doesn't know if he'll get a job because he only got one interview last year with Atlanta. So I'm surprised. I thought he really, really, really wanted to beat Shula because of what Shula said about him during Deflategate and Spygate, etc. I thought Belichick was livid at the time. I thought he'd be the Dallas Cowboys coach. You have a better idea, the Bengals coach, but I guess nobody reached out to him because they could have reached out to him now and said, "What about the end of the year?" And you're right, he's got 50 million coming now. Not that he needs it, but he's got 50 million coming too.
I think just the last one. I think it's more about coaching than money. I mean, he would have got paid a lot more if he was able to find a job in the pros. And Belichick's not a lavish kind of,
Right.
he has more than enough money. I think UNC though, there is both the sentiment with his dad. I really wouldn't downplay that. This is a sentimental guy.
I
This is a
agree.
really sentimental guy. Like if you told me he was going to coach Navy, I wouldn't be surprised either, right? I think UNC presents
I
though in a
wouldn't
way
either.
that Bama or those top SEC or a top Big Ten program wouldn't a particular challenge He's not just walking into a place where he's going to be able to recruit not just on his name, but on the school. I think he's going to embrace that and appreciate it. So it's fascinating. Look, he's at a college campus where he's not even the biggest show on campus, going down from the greatest, arguably NFL head coach of all time, which is pretty bizarre. But it's going to be interesting. It is sort of when you unpack it, though, a real Belichick decision.
Yeah, Steve, I would have laughed at that too. What he said about Navy, what Johnny said. There is a piece. It wasn't on Netflix. I'll send it to both of you. Somebody sent it to me. It's like an hour documentary about his dad and how his dad got into the NFL from what he was doing, where he played football, and Bill was just following him around, and dad was everything to him. And like Johnny said, the sentimental value. If he did have a chance to go back to Navy, I think he would have snapped it up, totally snapped it up. You got to watch this piece. I'll say it's fascinating because I love Hoodie. I love the mystique behind Hoodie. And just one more question. Anything, did you think that the NFL may have shied away from any reason that because he's 72, he has more energy than I do. I got to tell you that. And I mean, he's like 20 years older than me. But I mean, at 72, thinking, I still think if he really wants to, he's got at least 5 years, and that could be enough to turn a team around, a franchise around, and get them going. But did you think that anyone shied away from Bill Belichick because he was 72?
It is ironic, though, in 2009 when they had that. It's funny they did it during one of the worst years in the Patriots dynasty, but they followed him around week to week, and he said, I think effectively, I'm not going to be like Marv Levy. You won't see me doing this into my 70s. Now the question is he going to do it into his 80s? I think I don't think so, Joe, because age I think has sort of been redefined the last decade or so. He has all the energy in the world. I think it's purely about power and control. I think that's what this is all about. I think he could have been 62, 72, whatever it might be. It's possible, but I think this is less about his age. I mean, what's Andy Reid now? And he's not in the health Bill Belichick is, all due respect. He's getting up there too.
He is
Uh,
getting up there.
so
And I knew Andy when he was like, in his 40s, messing up my team. All right. Anyway, had to get that last shot in. All right, let's talk about this week, fellas. Speaking of Andy and his connections, Eagles Steelers. Steve, you know what the line is. I'm sure you've seen it. It's 5.5. So, as much as I don't want to, we'll get to the picks in a little bit, but I don't even think if this thing goes, listen, the whole thing in this town this week, Johnny, and I don't know if you've been plugged in, nothing about the Steelers yet. It's all about what AJ said about Jalen, and then the whole thing blew up. Are they not getting along in the passing game? Blah, blah, blah. So that's every news cycle has been talking about that. The national guys picked it up. They pointed out all the meat that Jalen left on the bone, and he did. He did, and that is a problem. It's not made up. Like I don't think AJ has a problem or Devontae with the fact that they, instead of 33 attempts that Jalen was throwing the ball, after the bye, they went down to 21 and then up with Saquon, and it worked. 9 straight wins. It's when they do pass the ball, why aren't they effective? That's the problem. 108 yards on 14 of 21, the 80 yards between Devontae and AJ. AJ was open all game long. Jalen goes back. The sack rate is they're 30th in the league in sack rate, but he drops back, can't find anyone. He gets the happy feet. He starts running to the right, and he throws so many balls out of bounds. It's unbelievable. What are your thoughts on this week going into the game, if that can have an effect on this team? I don't think it will. In fact, since the Steelers have the number 4 run defense in the league, I think they will be able to throw against these guys. Aside from that 5.5 sweet spot number, I think the Eagles should win this game against the Steelers.
I think you're right, but I think also, the Steelers turn these games into scrums, as we've talked about. And then since Wilson, a couple of games, puts up 30 points, puts up 40 points, threw for 400 yards once, I think. I think they're a very tough out. Johnny and I kind of like them as the long shot bet to win the Super Bowl. They're like plus 2,400 or something, and everybody else is like plus 500 or 600. But you don't want to play them now. You don't want to play them in the playoffs. Do I think the Steelers, do I think the Eagles will win at home? Probably. But I kind of think, again, Tomlin reminds me of Pat Riley with the Knicks in the old days, and he just turns every game into a scrum. And I think this will be another field goal game either way. But if you ask me who I like, the Eagles, I don't think I'm going to pick them in my picks. But if I had to, that's who I would pick.
this sounds like
I mean, George Pickens doesn't sound like he's playing this week. It's going to be a long
Yeah,
shot.
that's a problem. You're right.
I was just going to, this sounds like also a scrum sort of under, I don't know what the over or under is, but this sounds like a December Philadelphia two hard-nosed teams, kind of under game to me at first glance. I think
43 and a half.
what is it, Joe?
43 and a half.
Yeah, I'd probably like the under in that. I mean, they had a hard time scoring against Carolina last week,
They
didn't they?
did.
I
He
mean,
did. He's
you have
right.
if you have a hard time scoring against Carolina, who I know is better, they were talking about laying a lot of points. I know Carolina covered that one. It's going to be, I think, hard to score, and they were at home. I think hard to
Yeah,
score against.
I was
Yep.
at the Eagles.
What I sort of worry about, Joe, though, is look, obviously the passing game's a big problem. I know Brown's phenomenal, but you win 9, 10 in a row, and this is the story. This is what you're complaining. I don't know. That's a little concerning to me from a sort of internal team standpoint. Like at the end of the day, you find ways to win, and this is a problem they need to figure out. But they have the best running back in football, best running game in football. Um, Devontae Smith was out for a while. I know he was back last week, but he's sort of working back into it. I think the Eagles are in pretty good shape, but that sort of internal tension when you've won 9 in a row, I guess you could say that's part of building urgency for the playoffs, and they know at least what it takes to get to the Super Bowl. But I don't know. That's a little concerning to me to see that off a 9-game win streak, but you would have a better perspective than me.
It's
Well, John,
strange, but it's not the first time. AJ did this when were beating the Giants in a playoff game. They were up 38-7. He's complaining on the sideline. They were about to go to the NFC title game. He wants to eat. I mean, I kind of get it because it's annoying even as a fan watching Jalen, Browns open. First of all, they're undefeated like when he plays this year, and Jalen's record with him, he's has a 900% winning rate when AJ Brown plays, and he can't get him the ball as much as he probably should. It's not like he's got like 9 other guys he's distributing the ball to. You got Grant Calcaterra, Goddard's been out, and you got Devontae Smith. So I get it. I wouldn't have done it publicly myself, but if this blows up and everyone comes together and says, "All right, let's fix this," but I think it's more of a coach talking to Jalen. I think because he turned the ball over twice, he was turning the ball over twice a game until the bye. Since the 9-game winning streak began to where it is today, 22 touchdowns, 1 interception. I think he's a little gun shy. I think he waits a little too long because he's afraid to make that mistake now because he was getting hammered and the whole thing, they clamped down on the turnovers and it worked and it's been working. But I think it's now too much to the other side. You just go out there and sling it. It's
well,
okay.
Johnny, we've talked a lot, and I know you've seen this when we've talked about it. But since like week 3, we're talking about how the game has changed this year specifically, and the Eagles are the perfect example, as you said. They got the best running back with the most yards. Barkley escaped from New York, and now he's a super duper star MVP candidate. But you see, for example, as Joe said, last week they throw for 108 yards. I mean, I'm looking last night, and I'll just mention this briefly because I know time is short, but Rams 12, 49ers 6. Stafford, they put up 44 last week. He throws 16 for 27 for 160 yards. Purdy, who I love, but has kind of taken a step back, I think, because of injuries around him. 14 for 31 for 142 yards. Who remembers in the last X years, or every week there's a bunch of guys in the hundreds. So I think the game totally changed this year. Why? Because the running backs are not fungible. They're not interchangeable. Look at, Henry, look at Jacobs. Of course, Barkley is the league leader in these kinds of things now. And I think the game has really changed this year to become more of a running game. And frankly, the divas in football are always who? Always the wide receivers. Always, forever. Give me the damn ball. I mean, we can name 20 guys, but whatever. So I think it's really changed. And the receivers are the ones now who they're getting their money. The running backs aren't getting their money. They're getting their money, but they still get pissed off. They think it's last year or 10 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever.
I think the wide receiver bubble has burst, and again, running backs were devalued until about a year ago. But the top running games in the league: Philly, Baltimore, Washington, Detroit, and Green Bay, and they're 48 and 17 combined. I mean, and the top 6 of the top 10 receivers in the league are on bad teams. You know what I mean? Like it has changed. Now the power running games dictate a team's success. Wow,
Interesting.
how it changed so quickly.
And the one team that can really throw the ball down there in Southwest Ohio can't win games to save their life. I mean, Joe Burrow should be offensive player of the year, even though they're going to be a sub 500 team.
I think you're right.
Okay, the other marquee game this week, Bills and Lions. Bills coming off, well, they put up 42 points and lost. That's not easy to do. And of course, Josh Allen certainly didn't help his MVP resume, but it was in a losing cause. And you're right. To watch the Rams, NFL's a different every week. It's a different season because they went up and down the field against the Bills, and they could do nothing last night. Neither could San Francisco. But the Bills 2.5 points, dogs in Detroit. Detroit due for I mean, they've been kind of walking that tightrope too, like Kansas City has been walking. Of course, they've been emerging victorious. But Buffalo's 2 games behind the Chiefs. Really, if they want any shot at that number one seed, they kind of have to win this week.
I'll go on that. I mean, the Bills, I mean, he's an MVP candidate as well. I think the problem for a Barkley guy is you really need a quarterback who hasn't had a superb season. He's had a superb season. I think we're writing off Lamar as an MVP candidate, although he's having a real good season too. Um, so I kind of like I wouldn't pick this game, but I kind of like Detroit to lose a game. I love Campbell. We've talked all year about the mistakes he made last year and a couple of mistakes he's made this year. I'm just afraid all the time that he's going to do something that's stupid, like not kick a field goal to go up 2 scores or not kick a field goal to go up 3 scores. Why? Because the analytics tell you to go on 4th and 2, and they don't tell you to consider the score. I think that's a huge mistake that hurt him last year and might hurt him again this year. So I go Bengals, but lightly. Bengals. I go Bills, but lightly.
Johnny, your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a potential, Super Bowl matchup here, right? I mean, Buffalo, Detroit. I know there's some others who would disagree. I'd love to see Buffalo, Detroit in the Super Bowl. Can I just say that? I mean, two places two like Rust Belt cities. I think that'd be a pretty compelling story. But yeah, I think Buffalo was a little disappointing last week because of just how many points they gave up. They were playing pretty good defensively, and the Rams obviously, are pretty up and down, as evident offensively by yesterday, where I don't think there was a single touchdown scored in that game.
Right.
But I expect a pretty high scoring game in Detroit in the Dome. I think there's a fascinating. I don't know if we have a couple minutes to talk about this. Maybe you guys already have. I heard you talk about it, I think last week. Fascinating MVP discussion going on between Barkley and Allen. And I understand that the Bills lost last week. But I do think the one advantage Allen has in the MVP discussion is it's sort of hard if you're the average fan to name a guy he's playing with on offense now without Diggs being there, right? I mean, James Cook is very good, but he's thrown to a bunch of almost no-name receivers. I know they've gotten Amari Cooper, and they put up a lot of points, and he obviously gets it done with his legs. Barkley's having an historic season. Though, Joe, you mentioned, I think the fascinating stat, right? Look at their record with A.J. Brown. Not that he's in the MVP
Right.
conversation. A.J. Brown seems to be quite valuable to that team. Never mind, you have one of the best quarterbacks in football. So that's a fascinating conversation, the MVP race. Though I think if Detroit beats Buffalo, Buffalo goes down to 4 losses, it's going to be a much harder case. But yeah, talk about 2 great games, man. I mean, it's rare to have 2 great games like this late in the season. Philly, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Detroit. That should be awesome for Sunday.
Should be awesome. Kansas City, can they keep this going? They play. They're at the Browns, who I mean, the Jameis Winston experience. I don't know what to experience or what to expect to experience because I've seen him beat the Steelers. I've seen him go crazy in the next game where he threw 6 touchdowns, but 2 were to the other team. He's Jameis Winston. You like him, hate him. He's Jameis Winston. Can they make some noise at home against Kansas City, who's continuing this tightrope path? They're 12-1.
I don't think they can win the game, but I think they can cover. I mean, the Chiefs are notorious this year for not covering. I mean, just pick against them, which I won't do because you just expect them to explode and he throws for 420 yards and 5 touchdowns, but it hasn't happened and it still hasn't happened. So look, they look like a question mark, but don't forget last year, I think they were 4-4. And then unlike other teams, they could do this. They could just turn the light switch on. I don't know if any other team can do that in football. And that, when Mahomes has the ball at the end of the game, they win. Doink or not, block field goal the one game against Denver, I think it was. So I like the Chiefs to win the game as always, but somehow I don't think they'll cover.
Johnny, what do you think? What's your take on the Chiefs?
Chiefs are tough this year, man, because I understand last year they had a much worse record. They sort of turned it on. But when I watch them, I just don't see where's that firepower going to come from. Kelsey does look a little bit older. I understand he can get it going.
They're only
They
averaging 4 yards per carry.
Rice is out for the year. Hopkins looks good, not great. Worthy's explosive, but is kind of limited in the sort of routes that he can run. So I don't know where that, you could be right, Steve, but I don't know where that 420-yard potential game is going to come from. And I think one of these teams, man, against Kansas City, like just someone's got to strap up and hit these guys in the mouth. I mean, they like someone's just got to go take it from them. This is a team that it's going to be a one possession game in these playoff games. I understand we're not in the playoffs. I'm sure this is going to be a close game. Every game with the Chiefs this year is a close game, and it's in Cleveland. I mean, I don't know what the spread is, but
Or I'm thinking of taking, well, there are other games to pick than against Mahomes, but if I was had to take that game, I'd probably take Cleveland.
I think the problem just with Cleveland is Jameis can be a total. I mean, if it goes bad, it'll go really bad,
It
and
can go
then
really
it'll be a
bad.
blowout. So, but no, in terms of the Chiefs, man, it's hard to read. I mean, I've never been less excited if I'm thinking about championship potential for an 11 or I think it's now 12-1 team. However, they are the Chiefs. It's most likely going to have to go through Kansas City. I just think come playoff time, and maybe we'll talk about this again. Somebody just got to go in there and just take it from these guys. You need a quarterback. You don't even need like a Nick Foles in the Super Bowl performance. You need like one of those Eli Manning performances. You need to be able to play good when it matters the most. You need a defense who's going to, come in and really be physical at the line of scrimmage. I just think it's there, and if nobody takes it from these guys this year, man, it's going to be a long few years for all of us who
Gonna
aren't
be a
kidding.
long few years, my brother. All right, let's do
Joe,
some.
let's go picks. You go first, and then I'll try and wrap it
Yeah,
up.
again, my 5.5 experiment again was 1 and 2, but it also kind of blurs with the lines. When you bet bad teams, bad things can happen. I'm gonna go with Pittsburgh because it's the 5.5 point line. They are a good team. Eagles aren't a great cover team. I think it could be close. The Eagles don't have to. Pittsburgh doesn't have to win the game, and then I also like Buffalo. I like dogs. I'll take my shot with Buffalo to bounce back from the Rams game, and I think Detroit, they've been kind of living on the edge. I'll take Buffalo. And the other game I was considering. I told you guys I was considering the Browns in that situation, but I think there are other games to bet than against against Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to take Seattle. They've been the best team in the league over the last 4 games. They're at home against Green Bay and getting 2 points. I like home dogs. I'm taking Seattle plus the points against the Packers. Steven?
I'll be real quick. Bengals -4.5 at the Titans. Believe it or not, Jets -3.5 at the Jaguars. And the Broncos at home, 3.5 favorites over the Colts. I'll just leave it there. 2-1 last week, so I'm kind of back in action. And I just want to sum very quickly because I know we're almost out of time, Joe. I just want to give you the semifinals of the NBA Cup. Everybody
Oh,
knows.
please do. We should have put this higher in the rundown. Sorry about that.
Everybody knows what I think of the NBA Cup, but I feel obligated to say it's OKC, Milwaukee, Atlanta, who beat the Knicks, and the Rockets, who are a real good team this year, 17-8. They beat the Warriors. So those are your final four in the NBA Cup. I can't say any more about it. My final 30 seconds will be just on Juan Soto. We can talk more about it in the future, but as we get closer to baseball. But I think he had 41 home runs, career high, playing in the short porch at Yankee Stadium, which he will not have at Citi Field. And he will also have nobody who's anywhere near Aaron Judge hitting behind him. So he sees a lot more fastballs. And I think that's going to hurt his own production. Will it get the Mets to the World Series? Well, I'm a Yankee fan, and all I'll say is it's the Mets.
Johnny, your thoughts on Juan Soto?
It's the Mets, but they just outbid the Yankees, which, man, does that seem bizarre? I mean, the little brother is now outbidding the big brother. Yankees
True.
are going to have some postseason problems, man. Aaron Judge looks like a young New York Yankee, Alex Rodriguez in the postseason, and Soto covered up for a little bit of that this past postseason. So this as someone who grew up in the New York area, this is a tough one to see in a way. In a way, you'd be excited for the Mets, but this is bizarre. So. We'll see. I think it could get the Mets over the hump. And I'll just give you really quick to go back to the spread. Give me these AFC North teams, man. I'm going Pittsburgh. I'm going Cleveland. Let's roll all the way.
I
With
like
the
that. See,
with the
that's
points,
good.
obviously.
He's
With the
farming
points.
in the AFC North. I love that. That's why he's the brightest guy on the show.
That's right.
Johnny, thanks, man. We appreciate you coming on. You're always welcome, man. As we come down the stretch, we like to hear your thoughts. And your knowledge on the games because they're getting tighter, they're getting more exciting, and they get bigger as we go along. Stephen, great job as usual. You can find Steve's stuff on his daily Facebook forum page, Speaking of Sports with Steve Kallas, also his videos on westchestercountypost.com. This podcast on YouTube Fridays and Tuesdays, and also on the various Facebook pages and the audio outlets, Spotify, Apple, etc. Good stuff, guys. Well, Stephen, I'll talk to you Tuesday. Johnny, we'll talk to you if you want to come back on Tuesday to recap or next Friday to preview. Let's do it. Appreciate it, pal.
Always a pleasure, Joe. Great to be with both of you.
You too. Thanks, Johnny. Talk to you guys, and appreciate you watching, folks. We'll catch you next time.